A few weeks ago, ASUS South Africa sent me their 27-inch 4K monitor for a review, which you can check that video out here. Suffice it to say, I was impressed with that monitor. However, it appears that ASUS didn't think I was quite impressed enough, and decided to send me the PG348Q, the ultra-wide cousin to the PG27AQ that I reviewed. And boy, am I impressed. So let's take a closer look. The PG348Q has a 34-inch curved panel in a 21:9 aspect ratio. Within that 34 inches, ASUS has crammed nearly 5 million pixels with a resolution of 3440 by 1440. And I really have to hand it to ASUS here. This panel is stunning. Not only is it a high resolution display, but it's also an IPS panel with 100% sRGB color saturation and 10-bit color. But not only that, it is also capable of a refresh rate of 100 Hz with a gray-to-gray response time of 5 milliseconds and comes with NVIDIA's G-Sync adaptive frame rate technology. Which all sounds amazing on paper, but is even more impressive when you see this thing in person. Besides the panel, the PG348Q comes with a height, swivel, and tilt adjustable stand, which, as my wife put it, resembles a projectile. And just a side note, the monitor does not have the ability to rotate into portrait mode. Also within the stand are some cutouts for cable management. The color scheme of the monitor is, as ASUS puts it, plasma copper and armor titanium. And as much as those are flashy marketing names, the coloring is actually pretty impressive. Completing the stand is ASUS Light in Motion, which projects a red ROG logo onto whatever surface the monitor is on. Personally, I like this underglow lighting, but thankfully ASUS also includes options in the menu to dim the logo or turn it off altogether. For the rest of the design, ASUS uses matte plastic with some sharp designs on the back, and then has a decent brushed aluminum piece for the front bottom bezel. And speaking of the bezel, I'm actually quite shocked at how thin it is. While ASUS tries to disguise it by covering it with glass to make the monitor look seamless, the bezel is actually only 1.5 centimeters thick on the sides and top. The monitor also comes equipped with 2-watt stereo speakers, and while they may not be the loudest or most powerful, are actually decent enough to use if you don't feel like wearing headphones during gaming sessions. On the rear of the monitor, you'll find the various menu buttons and joystick, as well as the various I/O ports, which include the power input and headphone port, and then a 4-port USB 3.0 hub followed by DisplayPort, as well as an HDMI port for inputs. Also included with this rear section of the monitor is a handy pop-off piece, which allows you to disguise most of the cable clutter and route all of the cables through a single exit point. It seems that ASUS is very much going for a clean and sharp design aesthetic with this product. And it's a well-built and sturdy monitor to boot. The overall package comes in at nearly 12 kilograms or 25 pounds. So enough about the design of the monitor. How does this thing actually perform? Honestly, pretty flawlessly. As far as backlight bleed on the review sample that ASUS sent me, there's the usual bleeding that is typical of IPS panels. However, the fact that there's no spot of massive bleeding is certainly a feat when dealing with a high-res panel of this caliber. And the 100 Hz refresh rate combined with G-Sync provides some of the best gaming experiences I've ever had in terms of visual clarity. The one-button refresh rate overclock button made it super simple to get the extra performance out of the monitor. The curve of the monitor is subtle, but provides a decent wraparound experience when sitting closer to the panel. But now comes the critical part of the review. Firstly, I want to make it clear that my criticism actually won't be leveled at the monitor itself. Honestly, there's nothing noticeable to criticize the monitor on. No, rather the critical part of the review comes in the fact that the 21:9 ultra-wide form factor has limited support in many arenas. Not all games can natively support a 21:9 aspect ratio. Most prominently and importantly in my gaming library would be Fallout 4 and Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain, who are stuck with 16:9 support. And certain games like Black Ops 3 support the form factor in terms of available resolutions, but they end up looking squished and disproportionate. And I know that there's modifications that you can make to some games in order to get them to work with the aspect ratio, but that's honestly a problem that I shouldn't have to deal with, and should be on the game developer to support this form factor. And then outside of gaming, things like YouTube videos or even movies may not support the form factor and can include vertical as well as horizontal black bars where the movie won't display. The only movie in my digital library that supported 21:9 was Interstellar, but even Gravity only went up to 16:9. It certainly feels like the ultra-wide format is an afterthought to most content producers, which makes good content for it difficult to come by. But again, that's not at all the fault of the product. It's up to the content producers to make up that gap. However, I can say, when you do get 21:9 content, such as the Star Wars Force Awakens trailer, it's a pretty immersive cinema-like experience. And I will say the ultra-wide format was fan-freaking-tastic for my productivity workflow. Having Adobe Premiere and File Explorer and anything else I wanted open side by side gave me ample editing space. And even being able to enlarge my bins in Premiere on the other half of the monitor was amazing. And then just for general usage and multitasking, the vastness of this monitor makes it easy to have multiple programs open side by side without infringing on each other's personal space. And another point of not necessarily criticism, but word of caution to the prospective buyer. While the PG348Q is certainly marketed as an amazing gaming monitor, and by all means it is, there's the difficulty that the 3440 by 1440 resolution is incredibly difficult for individual graphics cards to properly power, especially with its ceiling of 100 Hz. ASUS South Africa sent over a GTX 980 Ti Matrix Platinum for review as well, and in most AAA games like The Witcher 3 or even Far Cry Primal, the card was barely averaging around 60 FPS. So even the top-of-the-line consumer NVidia GPU can't properly power this monitor to its full potential if you're looking to play modern AAA games. But again, not a criticism. As a more of a glass-half-full idea, you can consider this monitor future-proof, or a long-term investment. It's going to at least take a top-of-the-line Pascal or Polaris GPU or even further to get the monitor to hit 100 FPS on modern games. And speaking of long-term investment, in South Africa, this monitor is priced anywhere between 26,000 to just under 32,000 Rand, depending on the retailer. And suspected US pricing is expected to be anywhere between $1,200 and $1,300. Quite a bit of money to spend on a monitor. So conclusion time. The PG348Q is epic. And since in South Africa, its rival, the Acer Predator X34, doesn't have any hint of availability from what I can find, the PG348Q stands in a class of its own. This is the best monitor that you could get in South Africa in more ways than one. However, take a good look as to whether or not your gaming rig can actually handle this monitor, which is an odd thing to say. But in my use case, where I would use this primarily for video production, the aspect ratio and high resolution are perfect. If you're looking to get an ultra-wide monitor, you can't do better than the ASUS PG348Q. So if you can afford one and would utilize its aspect ratio, I'd say go ahead and get it. However, just as in my PG27AQ review, make sure you count the cost first. It's not a monitor for everyone, but it's definitely a monitor everyone can appreciate. And with that conclusion, I'd like to again thank ASUS South Africa for sending this monitor over for review. Like this video if you found it helpful, dislike it if you thought it was poo. You can subscribe to stay up to date on similar tech content and my upcoming review of the ASUS GTX 980 Ti Matrix Platinum graphics card. Or alternatively, you can watch this review of the ASUS Strix GTX 980 Ti. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.